Welcome, everyone. Ooh, I am so excited about our guest today. Johannes Lockwood is the resident astrologer at KariSamuels.com. And some of you may know him because we share his link with people to sign up for readings with him. And today we're bringing him out from behind the scenes into the front of the camera. And I'm so excited to welcome him. Johannes and we have actually a lot in common and a lot in common in our birth charts. Even though I grew up in the Bronx and he grew up in Denmark, we have so much synchronicity. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today, the synchronicity with each other that you have in your birth chart when you have these magical connections with people. So without further ado, let us welcome Johannes. Hello.
Hello, Kari. I'm just so happy to be here, and I'm just
I know
the energy is intense. Even though I'm in very, very cold Denmark, northern part of Europe, everything seems extremely hot and warm and cozy and hyggelig all of a sudden.
Oh yeah, that word can you explain it? I always see it written out. It's what is that?
It's 𝐁𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐸.
Yeah.
It's the hygge. It's like being inside with a blanket, with a cup of tea. Yeah.
Cozy. Yeah, well, today, actually, I'm going to go for a walk in the snow after we talk today. We very seldom have snow here in Portland, Oregon. And so it's very special. So it's special to talk to you, and it's going to be a magical day. Actually, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is connecting with the elements. So that's one of the many things we will talk about, because a lot of people see astrology as something that's very out there. And the way I like to do it, and I believe the way you like to share astrology, is something that's very connected to real life, elementally, very personal, right?
Exactly, and very connected to this lifetime and to previous lifetimes as well.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's why we're very connected. So Johannes and I practice something called evolutionary astrology. And I always say this too, like as a psychic, I'm very like past life oriented as opposed to future oriented. That's something that I have always been, and it's in my birth chart because you and I have this 12th house connection. So I have always been connected to past life influences. And I studied astrology for, I don't know, almost 30 years now. And I didn't realize it was something called evolutionary astrology. There's different types of psychics. There's different types of astrology. And so can you explain evolutionary astrology to all the wonderful people out there?
I would love to try. And you said correctly, like there are so many different types of astrology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's traditional astrology, evolutionary astrology, pop astrology, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And evolutionary astrology is all about acknowledging that we are not here in this life for the first time. We've lived many lifetimes, and we come into this existence not as a blank slate, but with tons of resources, tons of traumas, but also tons of potential. And that we all have not only one mission, but missions in plural to accomplish in this lifetime in order to grow, in order to transform pain, and in order to gain insights about love and wisdom. So what evolutionary brings to the table is a map to pinpoint these potential, these resources that we can gain and harvest.
It's interesting you mentioned trauma, because I don't think people associate astrology and being trauma informed or helping heal through trauma. Can you explain that more?
Yeah, definitely. So I think most, like, let's call it pop astrology.
Yeah.
It's all about acknowledging the light, and that's really cool. I mean, we all have light within ourselves, but we also need to remember the darkness.
Yeah.
There's light and there's darkness. So most astrology, especially the kind of astrology that we read about in the magazines, they're about like you're a powerful Aries or a steady and stable Taurus and things like that. But if you 1, 2, or 3 layers below that,
a lot of layers.
A lot of layers. There's immense amount of power hiding in the shadows. And if you shed light upon these shadows, you can actually transform the hidden darkness into your brightest light. So there's an immense amount of superhero abilities hiding in the shadows. But where to look? And in astrology, in evolutionary astrology, we focus very much on Pluto, the planet Pluto, on the North Node, on the South Node, and on the Moon itself. And those, especially those 4 pointers, will tell us not just who have you been in previous lifetimes, but will also tell us what traumas do you have in this lifetime and what is your main mission in this lifetime.
So trauma and mission are often very related. Would you say so?
Definitely. Because, I mean, the way you accomplish your mission in this lifetime is to heal your trauma, like to heal one of your main traumas. Because when you heal a trauma, one of your main traumas, it unleashes a great amount of energy that you can harvest to use for the benefit, not only for yourself and your friends and family, but also for society as a whole. So it's like a very efficient gas, a fuel that you can spend in a lot of other ways. Like instead of it being very reactive, you can use it in a proactive way.
I think it's hilarious, by the way, that because we are evolutionary astrologers, we just start right off talking about trauma. Hi, Johannes, welcome, trauma.
Exactly. That's also a new 12th house thing. I mean, yeah, you have your Pluto in the 12th house. So that's a very, very, very heavy placement. It's also part of the yard that you also have the finger of God. So the whole concept of trauma, the whole concept of digging below the surface and familiarizing yourself with your subconsciousness, that's a big part of your life.
Johannes is referring to literally my birth chart. When he says your life, he's talking about me specifically in this moment, but also everyone. Because Johannes and I both have 12th house, quite a bit of 12th house energy. And we also have something called a yod that he's talking about, which is a very somewhat rare placement referred to as the finger of God, which is like pointing at like, here, this is what you need to work on. This is very specific to you, and it's something you cannot get away from. And so that's what I found fascinating. I was drawn to Johannes. I met him through astrology reports that I licensed. And I was looking for a resident astrologer at the time. And then it was like, what you're looking for is always right beneath your nose kind of thing. And I was like, I bet. Because I didn't really know what you had, like the type of astrology that you do. Because again, I did not want a pop astrologer. And I was like, I bet you, Johannes has something that I'm looking for. And of course, I was so delighted to find out that you, Johannes, that you do evolutionary astrology. But then when we looked at our birth charts, we both have this 12th house, which is actually about past lives. So we're evolutionary astrologers who have this like past life influence, this 12th house influence in our birth chart. And then we both have something called a yod. And so I find it fascinating that the people that I bring into my life, which are not very many because I do have a lot of 12th house. And so I'm super private in a lot of ways. I'm very protected. You know, I really protect my space and my energy. And I find that the people that come into my life, there's so much synergy in our birth charts. Do you find that?
Yeah, and there's actually something that we haven't talked about. This is the first time I'm going to mention this towards you because I was just looking through our charts, just preparing for this. podcast, and I realized that my moon is directly conjunct your north node. And I mean, your north node is in 9 degrees Aries, and my moon is in 9 degrees Aries.
Oh my gosh, that's bananas.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I love when it happens. I'm actually getting angel bumps right now, and not because it's cold here too, but for real, like that is so cool. And oh my gosh. And so we have all these very similar things. And I do find that with people in my life, that when I look at their charts, because if you're in my life, I'm going to know your numbers and I'm going to know your astrology, but it's like the connection. So can you explain to people what a north node is? It's super important, and it's not talked about that much at all in pop psychology, astrology.
No, definitely. So we need to talk about the nodes in pairs. So we have a south node of the moon and we have a north node of the moon. And the south node of the moon is our past lives. It's the resources we bring into this lifetime. And the north node is the opposite. That's the land that we have not betrodden yet. So it's unknown territory. It's where we are heading. It's our not safe zone. It's where we are very naive, almost like a child. But we need to go there in order to harvest experience. We can harvest our experience already from the south node, where we have tremendously amount of experience, but in the north node we don't have any experience at all, and that's our way of learning, a way of progressing in this lifetime.
It's like a mythic quest. It's like, I like the way you describe it like that, like it is like a quest. And it's interesting because a lot of people talk about the south node, including me, like something that you're meant to move away from, and yet it is where we have a lot of resources, because we do have a lot of past life experience represented by the south node. And so we come into this life with this sense of like, okay, I've done this before. I have all these resources and I have to move away from them to go towards some great unknown that's calling me forth. Is that how you would experience the nodes?
Exactly. And I think it is of the utmost importance to remember that we should not just say goodbye to the south node. We need to remember the south node. I mean, your south node is in the 12th house.
Again, so, the 12th house. What a surprise.
Exactly. So you have in many lifetimes been connected to the spiritual realm.
Also and of course, surprise.
So obviously in this lifetime, you shouldn't say goodbye to your spiritual capacity.
Yeah.
You should just also do something else than being spiritual. I mean, you have a lot of experiences in regards to the spiritual realm, but there's also life outside spirituality, and that's one of your missions. That is to transcend sort of into the real world, and you are doing that with your spirituality. So in that sense, you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. Well, that gives me angel bumps too, because because I do have this south node, and it's actually conjunct my part of fortune. So it's like, I can't get away from my south node. I shouldn't, because it's where I have my luck. And so I experienced bad luck when I tried to avoid my spirituality. So it was interesting. Like it's this releasing south node. You're meant to release the south node, but you can't completely disconnect from it. It's still the tail of the dragon. So, and a lot of people, even evolution, again, I was even thinking about this, not even knowing we were going to talk about it, but I was like, I should talk about the south node more in terms of like the benefits of it. But my north node being in Aries, it's like I have to make myself do a podcast. I have to make myself.
And then, I mean, it's in the 6th house. Your north node is in the 6th house, which is the most practical house whatsoever. And it's in the sign of Aries. So it's also in this incarnation for you, it's also about being on the frontier and not caring about what other people think, but being a leader, on the frontier, just deciding for yourself, not needing to be validated by other people's opinion about the society.
That's right. And I also am a 9 life path, and I just made a video where I talked about the 9 life path, having to learn how to tune out the opinions of the world. Like everything about my chart is like that. And so I just want to use that as an example, because that's been very hard for me to learn, because I am very psychic and empathic. To learn how to not care about what other people think or feel about me has been very challenging. And that's why I teach it. So I want to bring this universally, right? That was a trauma and a challenge for me, and therefore that becomes my gift to the world, right? This is how this works.
Exactly. And that also brings in your yacht, because that's also what you're fated to bring into this world.
I mean, fated.
Yeah, you're fated. Yeah, but the thing is, there is a little thing here we need to discuss, because in many ways, in many lifetimes, you've brought your spirituality into the world, and I'm sure that this has created a very immense amount of positive impact for a lot of people. But the interesting thing is that the apex, the 3rd planet of your yacht, is in the 7th house of long-lasting relations. So, and since your south node is in the 12th house, I think there's a very karmic mission for you to acknowledge that this journey that you're on should not be walked completely by yourself, that it's important to do it with someone else.
That's so You're not alone. Interesting. My husband and I have been together 30 years. And one of the many reasons I fell in love with him, on our first date, we talked about astrology. I met him doing theater, but we are mystics together. So I brought my fellow, mystic with me on this life together, right? So when you look at a chart, is that one of the things that you're looking at? So you look at Pluto, the moon, and the nodes. What stories do they tell?
Well, they tell about how what's one's primary ego strategy. That means when one encounters difficulties in this lifetime, how does one react? And most of the time, the way we react consciously or unconsciously, I would say, is not the best way to react. So often it's the exact opposite that is intended of us in this situation. So I look at how people react, why they become reactive, and then I try to turn the energy to make the unconscious conscious and make the reactive proactive, in order for people to redefine their life compass, to regain power over their life situation. It's an anti-victimization process, actually.
It's a what process?
An anti-victimization process.
Anti-victimization. So it's because you mentioned fate, but fate and destiny are not the same.
No, you're right. You're not, and it's tricky ground that we are walking on now. And I would love to hear your perspective on it. But as far as I see fate versus destiny, I see that fate is something that you can choose to pursue, like you can choose to grow into it, whereas destiny is almost predetermined and it leaves you with little choice.
I actually see it as the opposite in some ways, but it's just semantics. There's the sense of choice in both of them. Like, I always saw it as fate is the hand that you are given, and destiny is your choosing to align with where you're headed.
Could be.
Yeah, but basically what we're both saying is that you're drawn, like your life is leading you toward a certain evolution. It's a train on the track, and you're headed there.
And that's also one of the advantages with taking this approach or this paradigm to astrology or spirituality. That is, if you acknowledge that you might have lived, let's just say, 1,000 lives before.
I mean, very possible, right?
Let's pretend that you've lived thousands and thousands of lives before. Then it actually, it becomes you become more gentle towards yourself, and you become more gentle towards other, and the suffering of yourself and the suffering of other.
Yeah.
And instead of pinpointing you have this one lifetime to accomplish yourself as a human being, then everything becomes so compressed, and you need to hurry yourself. You need to work on all your traumas and do transcendental work in all areas of life. But if you have acknowledged that you have lived 1,000 lives before this, and you are probably going to live 1,000 more lives, become more gentle, and you can start to take a little step at a time, and not try to take a long step and fail in doing so.
Yeah, like with everything, there's a sense of like, if you do too much, you cannot do anything, right? If you try to do too much. I was thinking about this today, which is a totally normal thought for me. I was like, oh, past lives. I was thinking about past lives in relation to that expression YOLO, like you only live once. I was thinking you don't only live once, but in this life, you kind of need to feel like you both do only live once and don't only live once. Like it's like you need to make this life super important, right? You can't be like, oh, I'll take care of it the next life. And yet at the same time, when we compare our lives to other people, for instance, let's say someone's very advanced at something because they've worked on it for many, many, many lifetimes. So when you're like comparing your life to someone else's, you don't know how many lifetimes they had to do and work on to develop their gifts, or even to get into a certain situation that seems like an opportunity or easy for them. So in that sense, it's really important to remember, like, look, we're all working on different things at different points in our soul's evolution. And the more advanced souls tend to take on quite a bit. Not an easy journey for the more advanced souls. So if you're looking at life like, this is my only life, oh no, like why did I have this situation? Or then it could be painful. But if you're like, okay, this makes sense that I lived a certain amount of lives and I'm working on this in this life. And so I want to make sure I maximize my potential within the circumstances that I was given. And those circumstances are your fate. Like your birth chart shows like what your fate is, but also your destiny potential, right?
It's such a good point you have there, because we wanna reach so many mountains in a way. I mean, we want to be the perfect husband, we want to be the perfect father, we want to be the perfect person on the job, we want to have the perfect body, we want to have everything. And I mean, we only have one north node, and the north node can only be in one house. So I mean, you need to relax a bit, you know?
We need to relax. Like, this is your north, when you say your north node's in a certain house, meaning like, let's break it down for people. The north node is this and the house is that. Can you just tell that in plain terms for humans, for humans?
Exactly. Yes. So we have, in astrology, we have 12 houses, and each houses are a domain in life.
Yeah.
And the north node is the mission in this lifetime. For instance, my north node is in the 7th house. So my main mission in this lifetime is not to be a super successful man on the job, or to work with the community as a whole and things like that. I'm actually supposed to learn to be in a committed, long-lasting relationship. That's my main mission this lifetime. Your North Node is in the 6th house. The 6th house is the act of service. So your mission in this lifetime is to not to just be in your monastery as a spiritual teacher, but to go down from the mountain and give your spirituality to the people as an act of service.
This is amazing. It's so funny because yesterday I shared a video, yesterday from the day of filming, about the Hermit, the card of the year, but also my life path card. And I said, you need to be a monk outside of the monastery. You have to get out of the monastery. So it's funny you're using the exact same words.
Exactly. And I mean, sometimes I have clients, for instance, highly successful women within highly leadership positions. And then I look at their chart and the North Node is in the 4th house. And I'm like, you need to be, I'm not going to say it like that, but it would indicate to give up ambitions, like career-wise, and actually almost be like a stay-at-home mom.
I don't know if I would go there, Johan.
I'm just saying, like, when you have the South Node in the 10th house, like these two,
let me explain. Your priorities doesn't mean that you need to give up your ambition.
No.
You need to say, it's like, don't put pressure on yourself to...
That's what I mean.
Don't put pressure on yourself. Because here's the thing. We're taught right now, you could be it all, you can have it all, but we have limited energy and limited resources. And it could be a lot of pressure if you're like, look, I'm very successful at this, or I have this. But if someone has a North Node in a 4th house, they have a very strong desire to, the 4th house being about home and family, opposite the 10th house, which is about career. So there's this sense that you came into this life with your South Node, your resources, being someone very good at career, right? And then the North Node in the 10th house saying, you have those resources, you can draw upon them, but you can let it go. You can let go of the focus on it, and you're meant to. Because when there's opposites in the chart, you're torn, right? You're torn within terms of like, okay, I came within these resources and I came with all these gifts, and yet your life drive in the North Node is guiding you towards something else.
So true, so true. Yeah, you're completely right. Those people should, of course, never give up their South Node. They should just not perhaps focus so much about the South Node and just try at least to play and get to know the North Node and see what happens.
I'm very, it's so interesting. You meant, that's why I was like, no, we're not talking about that because we're fighting against the trad wife movement right here. Okay. So we're not going to go, women, you stay out in the world if you want to. But what Johannes was saying, perhaps you were saying like in terms of like letting go of like, hey, you want to take some time off to focus on that, like let yourself off the hook, right?
Basically, I'm just trying to say that magic happens when you experiment with your North Node.
Yes, magic does happen.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, because the house, the 4th house is like, look, you have you came into this life to learn what it's like to like be okay with letting go of ambition, even though it's a gift of yours, right? And to focus on like 4th house things, right? If someone has their North Node. So when you're looking at like, and I'm sure the sign has a lot to do with it too, like your North Node in a certain sign, right? And it's amazing that you can learn so much about what drives a person just looking at, and nodes are not even planets, right?
No, they're just in a way artificial ways mathematically to pinpoint an axis, formulated on behalf of how the moon is compared to the Earth.
Yeah, it's intersecting with the path. So it's like it's the moon's it's not really artificial in the sense that like made up. It's an actual ecliptic, right? But it's a relationship, but it's not a planet. It's a point in the sky. When you were born, this relation with the moon. So talk to us about the moon then. Like, how is the moon in your birth chart? What does that represent, and how does that play out in people's lives?
Definitely.
Skål, by the way.
Yeah. Skål.
We're talking about the moon, so we have to drink water.
So I would say like 90% of people interested in astrology, they care more about their sun sign than their moon sign.
Yes, that's because of pop psychology.
And so, and one needs to acknowledge that sun sign astrology has only been around for about 100 years, and astrology has been around for, 6,000 years.
Yeah.
And it was only like within this period of 100 years that sun sign astrology became so popular. And the reason why sun sign astrology became so popular was that everyone knew their sun sign. So the magazines, they had to make a column, and they couldn't bring the moon signs because no one would read them, because no one would know their moon sign. So when I talk to people, and when I talk to just normal people or clients, I mean, most people relate when they first hear their moon sign. They actually almost relate much more to their moon sign than to their sun sign. So there are many trajectories in our hero's journey in astrology. One hero's journey is from the south node to the north node. Another hero's journey is from the low frequency of the moon to the high frequency of the sun. So the first shadow, so the first shadow you need to confront as a human being that wants to walk on a spiritual path, that is to confront the shadow side of the moon. I mean, my moon is in Aries, so
9 degrees Aries. I just found out.
Exactly. So I had to confront my big temper. I had to confront being too much, being too outward spoken, being too competitive. So those were things that I needed to confront and release in the beginning of my spiritual journey. So we all need to confront these darker sides of our moon in the first half of our life, let's say it like that, in order for us to gain traction, to try to gain the high frequency side of our sun.
So the sun and the moon, how they relate to each other. I've never thought of it like that. The shadow of the moon to the high frequency of the sun. And the sun is how you express yourself, how you're shining your light in the world. And that's the part, we see that, and that's your destiny. That's how what you're headed toward. So the sun is like, you're not necessarily, because when people read their sun sign, it doesn't always make sense to them, because we're meant to develop those qualities too. It's all about what you're developing. But I love how you relate the moon and the sun. And of course, now we're all going to be thinking of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
So I think most people would be able to relate much more to their moon sign in the first half of their life. And then the second half of their life, they would relate more to the sun sign.
Because you're developing your inner world to express it more, to express your destiny out in the outer world. And the moon, how would you explain the moon in the birth chart to someone? Like, what does it represent?
It represents our temper. It represents how we seek comfort. It represents the internalized mother. It represents our sacred space. It represents our way of belonging. But first and foremost, we need to attend the moon in order to feel safe. And no development can happen if we don't feel safe.
That is the truth.
Yeah. So that's the reason why we need to unlock the healing modality of the moon, first and foremost, because otherwise we cannot grow if we don't feel safe.
That is the truth. And learning how to feel safe is a big part of our journeys, because the world is not really, a stable place, especially not now. But I would love to hear how you define Pluto. How would you define Pluto in the birth chart? Because you mentioned you look at Pluto. Actually, I think Pluto was the first thing you mentioned. You mentioned Pluto, the moon, and the nodes. So talk to us about Pluto. How would you define Pluto, and what does it show us in the birth chart?
So Pluto shows us our primary trauma in this lifetime. It shows us where we've been wounded in prior lifetimes, but there is also a hero's journey embedded in the Pluto journey. So when one works with the Pluto trauma, it creates an immense amount of power. I mean,
because Pluto is power, right?
But exactly, it's the greatest power of it all. And I mean, for instance, you have Pluto in the 12th house.
I do, and it's conjunct a bunch of stuff, like very important.
It is. So your Pluto is actually very hidden. Initially it's very hidden, but when you uncover it, it creates a power field within the subconsciousness, not only for you, but also for the people around you. But people who are not spiritually inclined or are working with shadows the way you do, they would have a very hard time having a Pluto in the 12th house, because then Pluto is gonna take charge of their life without them knowing it.
Well, because Pluto is it's the unconscious in a lot of ways, and mine is in the house of the subconscious, and that's why I consciously focus on subconscious healing.
Exactly. So you've transformed it, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be the great healer you are. But yeah, so that it's actually where I would say that's the primary place where you harvest your spiritual gifts in a way. I mean, you also have a strong Neptune, of course, but it's the Pluto in the 12th house that really makes you harvest the deep soul energy.
Yes. So Johannes is, once again, referring back to my personal chart as an example.
Yeah.
And so, but not everybody has their Pluto in the 12th house. So what are you doing when you look at the signs of Pluto, and Pluto stays in a sign for 20 years. So it's a generational thing, but the house and how it relates to people, right?
Yeah, the thing is, it's actually there where the sessions can be quite awkward, in the sense that Pluto is in its essence a shadow. Yeah. It's a trauma that you don't realize.
Yeah.
So often, not often, but I would say 10% of the clients that I have, they refuse to go in that direction. They will be like, no, that's not me. I don't have a trauma like that. They will almost have a trauma reaction when I confront with the trauma in the chart. And I mean, I've also learned that you need to step very carefully when talking about these things.
Well, Pluto is explosive, so exactly. You don't want to step on that.
Exactly. So the thing is, Kari, you as in Kari, have a Pluto in the 12th house, which is the hidden subconscious house. I have Pluto in my first house. So, I mean, I push Pluto towards everyone.
It's on your sleeve. You're wearing Pluto. You're just going to blow things up.
Exactly. And I mean, that's also the reason why it's not for everyone to have a session with me. I mean, I think it's for most people, but one needs to be willing to go into the darkness, and at least wanting to shed light upon the darkness, wanting to know what's beneath the shadows, and it's not an easy thing, but it's an extremely learningful experience.
I'm getting angel bumps about that as well, and it's so funny because I'm just looking at the lighting, like you're sitting there, like in the dark. to play with your light. And I have the light, like, right, you know, like, and my son behind me. However, I got this Pluto thing, and I'm laughing inside in a Plutonian way, because in a Pluto in the 12th house way, because obviously, I guess people have described me as having like a sunny personality or whatever. And when I was doing one-on-one readings, so my gifts as a psychic, I went straight into the shadow. I am a shadow worker. I'd be like, I'm like an exorcist. I'm like, I'm going to take your demons and like show them to you. And people sometimes would get very upset, very, again, like super rare, but like it would happen. They'd be like, this isn't what I signed up for. I didn't come here for this. And they would get really mad. And then they would always, I can't even think of a few exceptions. They would always come back like a year later. You were right. They were like, I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to look at it at the time. I didn't, you know, but they thought they were coming for like entertainment purposes, right? Like they think, oh, this will be fun. I'm going to go get a reading and la 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 and sunny and la 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 and joy and happiness coast. And then I'd be like, this is what you're dealing with. This is why this is happening to you. Because I do have a lot of 12th house, and I that is my gift as a psychic, is to see into the shadow. But because I'm not wearing it on my sleeve, I don't have it in the first house, people wouldn't expect it. And it's very uncomfortable. Very, very uncomfortable. Sometimes, if that's not what you think, but I would make it clear in my literature, like, you know, this is a healing process, but people don't know what that means. So when you and I, especially even as evolutionary astrologers, like you and I, we've talked about it, like we have different family traumas, but still like it was a part of how we even got into this kind of stuff, right? But that's a specificity of yours, right? Like healing family trauma.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, especially since I've become a father myself, mm-hmm. I am very much about healing family traumas and traumas between parents and children and grandparents, and yeah, it's something that I truly love and that touches my heart, very profoundly. Yeah.
Well, one of the sessions that you do is like parent-child sessions, right? Don't you do like specific to your relationship with your child, right?
Exactly. And it's so, I mean, one of the hardest things for me was to become a father. I mean, it was also the greatest thing, but it's obviously super difficult. I mean, you're being confronted with so many things. And
so I hear.
yeah. And but the thing is, you can see it in the chart. I mean, if you put your son's or daughter's chart on your chart, you make what one would call a synastry analysis. I mean, everything opens up. The reason you understand, so all of a sudden you understand why you play so well together, or you don't play so well together, or you fight all the time. You understand the current circumstances, but you also understand previous lifetimes you might have had together and how they play into this lifetime.
Yeah, we choose each other, right? And it's written in the birth chart. I remember my first astrology reading, and she was talking about my relationship with my parents, and I was like, how do you know that? What is going on? And this is before I met my now husband. And she was like, this is the time frame where you're going to meet your soulmate. And I was like, what? It definitely was not seeming like a probability at that time. And she was telling me about all the troubles I was having at the time. And I was like, what? How do you know that? Like, what is happening? Like, I didn't understand how she can understand my parents, that sense of, because 12th house is associated with isolation and loneliness sometimes, which I've experienced it at different points in my life. And I definitely was at that time. And I was like, wow. And that's part of why I like synchronistically, my first conversation with on our first date with my now husband was about astrology. Like, and he knew astrology. And again, that's destined, isn't it? But I just find it fascinating how it's our relationship with our parents is predestined. And I think don't you and I both have Pluto, the death planet, in our 4th house now?
I think we do. I do, at least.
I do.
I didn't check. Yes, I do. We do both.
And
yes.
As soon as Pluto went into my 4th house, people know my father passed away just a couple months ago. And like, as soon as it went into the 4th house, that process started for like both parents, and I like totally moved locations, and like, and it's like, I found this in my clients' charts too, like the death of their parents even, or the death of a loved one is like lined up in their chart. So it's like life and death is so, there's a sense of divine timing in it. Like we're meant to learn these spiritual lessons at this point in time. And like how we can see that in a birth chart is mind blowing.
It is. And just to pinpoint, when we talk about Pluto, like most people, when they hear Pluto and they know a little about astrology, they think about death, but they forget the rebirthing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so it's death, and people get shocked. Oh, it's all about death. No. It's 50% about death and 50% about rebirthing. Yeah. So Pluto is not a bad planet or bad person. I mean, it's here to learn us to be the most authentic version of ourselves. Yeah. And I mean, your Pluto went into 4th house. You experienced a whole new way of gaining inner security, I guess.
It is the truth. It is the truth.
Yeah.
It is the truth.
Exactly.
And it's been very healing, interesting for my South Node in Libra, which is overgiving. Because I had to do all this healing about finding security through overgiving. So it was very connected, and it forced me to do all kinds of healing. And when my parents were passed, my mom is still with us, but in a different way than she was before. And so, because my mom has dementia now. So anyway, it's been very hard. And so that forced me to have a lot of healing about my own childhood as well. When your parents are leaving the world, you have to confront your feelings about everything about them. So it has been a very empowering process. And that's what Pluto is helping us do, is empower us.
Exactly. And having Pluto transiting your IC, which is the house cusp of 4th house, it is one of the biggest astrological things that's going to happen in your lifetime.
Yeah, and I felt it.
Yeah, so it's a big one.
So when you're looking at a chart, you're looking at all these Pluto in the birth chart, but also like where they're moving now. You're looking at the node. I mean, obviously you're looking at the whole chart, but you're looking at the nodes, you're looking at the transformation, and just those 4 things you can talk for hours. I imagine, right? Just looking at even though you're looking at the whole chart, like it's amazing how much information just that can give, right?
Exactly. And sometimes one needs to try to simplify things, because some astrologers, they will tell you 20 things. And then and that's not my strategy. Yeah. I try at least to tell you 1, 2, or maximum 3 things, because those are the most important things. Yeah. If you have those, if you work on those 3 things, everything will be really, really good.
Fall into place, because you want to be like, okay, like plugging into a GPS. This is where you're headed. Make sure you're headed in that direction, and then everything makes sense after that. This is why, can you see, everyone, why I love Johannes so much and why he is our resident astrologer? Johannes is doing a special for video readings now. You can obviously get a longer one-on-one session, but Johannes and I have talked for months about this. Like, how do we make this more accessible for people? So Can you tell us about the video readings? But we have to remember to do your magic lesson after that, okay? Okay, can you tell us about your readings and your video readings and how people can connect with you? I'm going to send a link for you to connect with Johannes.
That would be great. I mean, so the thing is, I'm in a completely different time zone than you are. And and a lot of your listeners will be in a completely different time zone than I will be in. So that's why you and I invented
the internet.
No, but we discussed and we were like, we have been doing a lot of sessions previously, but there's been this time zone issue. So let me try to do a lot of video sessions with people where I get their astrological data and I do their charts, and then I tell them either I tell them about their career and life purpose, I tell them about their relationships and their love, or I make them a whole overview about the next year. So it's either one of those three domains, and then people get a video with me analyzing their birth chart and the transits.
And we made this very accessible, very affordable. And if you want a longer session, you can have a longer session. If you want to meet him one-on-one on actual camera, you can do that. But we invented these mini video readings. They're not really mini. I mean, they're deep and action-packed, but they're very accessible. And so you can do this in your own high time in Denmark and send them.
And one can also get the video reading and then like feel, okay, is this for me? Do I like the energy? Do I like what he's talking about? Do I see myself in this? And then book a session. So it's actually a nice way of just trying to see whether it actually works for you or not.
Exactly. And that's why we made it super accessible and super fun. And although, maybe they're not always fun. Like I said, you don't know what you're going to get. You're looking at the dark side of the moon too, but also the light, the high frequency of the sun. And that's the whole point. So Johannes, we always like to end with a magic lesson, something for people to focus on, for them to connect with a lesson and energy, something simple to focus on throughout the day to incorporate a spiritual lesson or something we're talking about. What magic lesson would you like to share with people today?
I think that, I don't know whether it's a simple thing, but I think it's a very beautiful thing and it's a very necessary thing. And so I would invite people once a day to close their eyes and give themselves a big hug while they think of themselves as being 5 years old.
Oh, that's
and
so
just
sweet.
Really, really try to connect with the 5-year-old in themselves and really try to remember how it is to be 5 years old and remember that they're still, in some sense, a 5-year-old child.
I love that so much. That is beautiful. What a sweet and loving magic lesson for everyone. Thank you so much. Johannes! Yay! I'm so glad that people finally got to know you and enjoy your light. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. And I'm so glad. So Johannes Lockwood, everyone, and I'll leave a link for sessions with him down below. And to know him is to love him. Thank you, Johannes, and thank you everyone for listening. We love you. Lots of love. Bye for now.